University in Beaumont, Texas. And this year, we had to announce a co-sponsorship by the Assassination Information Center here. Your host for the program this year, as in all past 5 years, are myself, Vic Sims, and Mr. Gary Shaw on your right, seated on your right. Rather than take up a great deal of time in introductions, I would just like to quickly go over and introduce some of our special guests here. We truly have a collection of stars in the research world of the John Kennedy assassination. A close friend of mine and his wife came down from the University of Arkansas to be with us. Dr. Frank Frassel here, and his wife standing in the door. And Frank was my mentor when I began teaching, and I appreciate it very much. He is teaching a course this semester at the University of Arkansas for the first time, which studies the John Kennedy assassination. Gary Shaw, as an architect, has been researching and writing about the case for many years. Co-author with his book is Mr. Larry Harris, the man on your left. They have both contributed and helped enormously. We have some other names in the faces in the crowd, which I will let others introduce later on in the evening. But the star of our show, certainly this afternoon, is Mrs. Mary Ferrell. There's some disagreement, and understatement, there's some disagreement on certain aspects of the Kennedy assassination. However, as we look at all the significant writers, as we look at all the researchers, we find they agree on one point in general, and that is, come on in, and that is that Mrs. Mary Ferrell is the starting point A in all research work that's been done in the Kennedy assassination. For 29 years, in 4 hours, about 4 hours, she has been researching in a scholarly fashion the assassination. She has not written any books. She has not sold any books. And with only a few, 3 or 4 exceptions, and this is one of them, she does not even make speeches. She sells nothing. She is a scholar. She has drawn no conclusions. On the lighter side, all of you can appreciate what it means when a teacher tells you to go to the library and look up a subject and make 10 3x5 cards on it. It's quite a bit of work. We've all done it one time or another. Mary and Bob Ferrell began researching this case the day it happened, and they're still working on it. In the interim, all the time, Mary has been a full-time legal secretary, has numerous other qualifications and credits to her name. And in her spare time, she and Buck traveled to New Orleans and helped Jim Garrison in the prosecution of the case. And then when she was not too busy doing all of that, she and Buck raised a fine family. And when she was not busy doing all that, she found time to complete between 35,000 and 40,000 3x5 cards on the Kennedy assassination. They built a building in the backyard, a house of books and literature, and she is the only bibliographer, the foremost bibliographer. There is no number 2 compared to Mary Ferrell. A real scholar and inspiration. Mary Ferrell.
This is the 29th anniversary of a crime against a man, his family, the presidency, and the republic for which he stood. I'm honored to have this opportunity to speak to those upon whom we are depending to lead a movement which could result in the restoration of one of our most cherished democratic principles, respect for the rule of law. This is a time of emergency, a crisis in the life of an experiment our forefathers launched long ago, one which we still advertise as being dedicated to justice for all, one upon whose outcome the future of our republic depends. This is a time when a miscarriage of justice can ignite a firestorm of public indignation that can result in murders and mass destruction of entire communities. Today, I implore you to take action against the shocking decline in the sanctity of and respect for the rule of law. The highest officials in this country's legal establishment have never enjoyed less trust and respect, a condition brought about by a succession of shocking abuses of the power which we conferred on them. We have a Justice Department which is not always just, one which has subordinated its responsibilities to the will of the executive, a Justice Department which all too often bows to the wishes of the tenants of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue instead of the tenants of law. We cannot expect men in the streets to respect the law while men in high office continue to trample on it. The examples are numerous, but let me review just a few. In 1979, the House Select Committee on Assassinations sent the Department of Justice their report and 12 volumes of appendices, including an acoustics report showing a 95% probability of there being more than one shooter in Dealey Plaza 29 years ago today. The House Committee's report made specific recommendations for further investigation and concluded, quote, "The committee believes on the basis of the evidence available to it that President John F. Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy. The committee is unable to identify the other gunman or the extent of the conspiracy." Close quote. Over 9 years later, the Justice Department replied that they could find no evidence to support the conclusions of the committee. Was this case of such minor priority that it had to wait 9 years to receive their attention? Or was it such an unpopular topic inside other government agencies that the committee's report was allowed to gather dust in the hopes that it would be forgotten, which in no small measure it was? During Iran conflict, Ronald Reagan's influence over Attorney General Edwin Meese resulted in a disgrace. The prosecutions of self-confessed wrongdoers by Special Prosecutor Lawrence Walsh have so far ended in the reverse of Oliver North's conviction. Poindexter's conviction is on appeal, and there was a mistrial in the Clara George case. This situation has raised indignant concerns over the high cost of attempting to convict persons, many of whom had admitted their crimes in front of a committee of the Congress and millions of citizens who watched those proceedings. Bush is being urged to pardon Caspar Weinberger. I ask, pardon him for what? He has not been convicted of anything yet. Gerald Ford set a precedent when he pardoned Richard Nixon in the Watergate scandal. Federal Judge Marvin Shue, presiding over a recent trial in Atlanta, Georgia, dealing with illegal loans to Iraq, had repeatedly called upon the Justice Department to appoint a special prosecutor to look into possible criminal violations on the part of the Bush administration. The judge's sentiments were echoed by the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, and the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. But Attorney General William Barr turned a deaf ear to all of them until two things happened. The November election had passed, and the pressure became so great that he finally agreed to a compromise and appointed retired federal judge Lacey to inquire into the matter. Why should it have taken so long, and why was there a compromise? Or stated another way, upon what meat doth this Attorney General feed that he hath grown so great? Such abuses have not always succeeded in cowing those entrusted with preserving the rule of law. When conduct during the trial of the Watergate burglars convinced Judge John J. Sirica that justice was being thwarted, he saw to it that the attempt failed. Good men did not just stand by when the tenant at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue tried to strong-arm Attorney General Elliot Richardson into firing Archibald Cox. The courage of Richardson and his deputy, William Ruckelshaus, was eloquent testimony to steadfastness in the proper administration of law, conduct on the part of the administration of justice to which the citizens of this country are entitled. The actions of those officials reflected great credit on themselves and their department. I am counting on you to emulate their examples. You must replenish America's arsenal of justice by refusing to equivocate in order to please. You must put an end to the bureaucratic dictum which advises that the best way to get along is to go along. Your chance could not have come at a better time. In January, we will inaugurate new leaders, unburdened by the concerns of a Cold War which has finally passed. Younger men, much closer to your own generation. Men whom we are counting on to prove once again that this is a government designed for the people, not for the convenience of public officials and their appointees. Our country desperately needs law enforcement officers who uphold the law without discrimination. We need a Justice Department filled with people who believe in justice for all. Those are the people who will eventually unravel the mysteries surrounding the Kennedy assassination. When the rhetoric of today's proceedings have long been forgotten, the contribution which we are counting on you to make will always be remembered.
Mary's not feeling well this afternoon. This is not the first time she's came down here under pressure and feeling ill to make a presentation. So we love Mary. We sure appreciate it. Gary Shaw has been helping me since I started this project, and he's been a tremendous help. I could not have done it without Gary Shaw.
Let me move over here so I can get on camera, he says. It's nice to be here, and I'm just going to talk briefly because I want to talk to you as people, as Mary has said, we're counting on for the future. I wrote a book this last year with Dr. Charles A. Crenshaw. You may or may not have heard of it. I hope you have. The way it was brought out the format that was used, the way it was publicized was by design and not by accident. We had some luck along the way in that Oliver Stone's little movie just happened to come out and cause a great deal of controversy and publicity. But we thought when we wrote the book that the doctor had a story, very truthful, and account of what happened November 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, 1963. When he first approached me, I said, "Doc, well, write and tell the truth." And he said, "I want to." And I said, "But I want to warn you, when you do, you're going to lose some so-called friends, and you will be attacked." He said, "Oh, okay, I'm sure that'll happen." But not really believing that it would. We decided to put the book out in a little paperback, basically for several reasons. One, everybody has $5. Number two, there's dozens of good, meticulously footnoted, documented, well-documented books dealing on all the facts on the Kennedy assassination. If you want to do research, those are the books to go to. We felt it was a time that the American people, as a whole, hundreds of thousands and millions of them, ought to be able to pick up something that told the truth about those 3 days. And so it was very successful. So much so that you got Dr. Crenshaw on 20/20 television, which, I don't know whether you know it or not, goes into about 19 million homes. That's a pretty good PR work. He did. The book went immediately to the New York Times bestseller list and has done quite well. We was pleased. Some were not. We found out pretty quick. Because I want to talk to you about the counterattack on this man right here. And it was violent, brutal, anything that you want to term it. They call this man a liar for having told the truth about what he saw and heard on those days so long ago. The counterattack was not without plan or design, and that's really what I want to stress to you. Because it seems that immediately, when Oliver Stone announced that he was making a movie on the assassination and that he was using Jim Garrison as a key in it, before the script was written, before a piece of film had gone into the camera, there was attacks from him from all across this country, from the Washington Post to the New York Times to the LA Times to you name it, saying that the movie that he was going to make would be a lie, would be deceitful, it would deceive the American public, it would not be anywhere near the truth, and so forth. They did the same thing to this man, and I was with him when those attacks came, and for about 2 or 3 weeks it looked like he just lost his best friend, because you see, some of the very doctors that he served his medical, residency with, their department attacked him. Called him a liar. Said that he was doing this for money. And why am I saying all this? I'm saying it because the counterattack really started back in 1966, when the first critical books came out on this subject. And a CIA document was circulated around this globe to various CIA stations, which was how to combat the criticism on the Warren Report. One of the first things that they say, they never once mention refute the facts. Never once address the issue of who could be right and who could be wrong. What did they do? Attacked the messenger. They can't confront the message, attack the messenger. Say that they are financially interested. Say they're crazy. Give any kind of motive, but attack the messenger. And that's what they did to this doctor here. Well, the newspaper articles and the news media and so forth picked up the story, and immediately he was accused of things like peddling lies, defamer of truth. Everything that you could think of was said about this particular little book. It was a counterattack, and it was all out. The biggie, though, came when they had a press conference and announced that the very powerful and prestigious Journal of the American Medical Society had suddenly chosen to use their format and their prestige to publish a refuting what this doctor said about the number and the direction of the gunshots and what the president really looked like when he was brought in. He was in shock when that happened. You can understand that. But I went back to the CIA memo and I showed him, Doc, one of the first things they said to do to these CIA agents around the world is to go to media assets, especially editors, and give them stories and urge them to print stories that refute and would combat what any critic of the official version had to say. Do you think that's by accident or by design? And they always do it with misinformation and by attacking the messengers, never able to refute what the man has said in this whole book. Two things they said. One is that he was lying when he said that the shots came from the front. Even some of the doctors at Parkland Hospital said it's not true. Well, you go back to the sworn testimony under oath of the doctors who called him a liar, and you find out, without exception, the shot that hit the president in the throat was a wound of entrance. The shot that hit the president in the head flew out the back of his head. In other words, they agreed with Dr. Crenshaw, and yet they turned right around and attacked him. What's the reason for that? It was very puzzling and very hurtful to him. The second thing they accused him of lying about was that he was at Parkland Hospital attending Lee Harvey Oswald for his wounds on November the 24th, when someone tapped him on the shoulder and said, could you take a phone call? He took the phone call, and a big booming voice on the line says, this is President Lyndon Johnson. How is the accused assassin doing? And he says, of course, well, he's holding his own, to paraphrase it. And he says, well, there is someone present in the operating room who will take a deathbed confession from Oswald. Well, sure enough, Doc had noticed a man in there already in a scrub suit, knew he was not hospital personnel or a doctor. Said the man looked like Oliver Hardy to him because he was such a big man. He had on an ill-fitting scrub suit and had a badge and had a gun dangling out of his pocket. Well, they said this didn't happen. This was all a lie. I wasn't ready for that. I mean, I believed Dr. Crenshaw, and I knew that there were phone calls to various people in Dallas, like Captain Will Fritz and others from Lyndon Johnson, that he did take an active role. And so I could see no reason at all for Dr. Crenshaw to lie, but I had no backup for that. Well, I want you to know that since the story broke and since he was attacked, at least 3 people have came forward and said, in fact, one was the switchboard operator at Parkland Hospital, and she said, yes, there was a phone call. Yes, the man in a loud booming voice said, this is President Johnson, connect me to the operating room, and who was out refused to connect Lyndon Johnson wherever he wanted to be connected. And so she called the operating room. Dr. Crenshaw was the only one whose hands were free at the time. And so that did happen. All I'm trying to do, and I'm going to be very brief about this, is that when you see the media attack a critic and attack the messenger, pay absolutely no attention to it. Go ahead and look at the background of this. Find out what the real truth is, and call their handler. This lady that ran the switchboard at Parkland Hospital immediately wrote a letter to the Dallas Morning News and said, I'm tired of you bashing Dr. Crenshaw. I've known him for years. He's not a liar. I took the call. Dr. Philip Williams came forward said, man, we've talked about that for 30 years. The call did take place. So there's confirmation of all of that. What did the Dallas Morning News, who accused Dr. Crenshaw of peddling lies, and on that specific point, what do you think? Did they quit her letter? Confirming the phone call? She gets the low standard postcard back, saying thank you for that. We've chosen not to print your letter at this time. So, misinformation is one thing. Y'all know the difference between misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation is what I do occasionally. I make a mistake and I print something that's wrong. Disinformation is when you knowingly print a falsehood in order to carry a subject matter off in another direction. They're experts in it. So you folks are going out, you're in law, perhaps all of you, I'm assuming something here. When they do this, call their handler. If they can't prove that they're calling someone a liar when they make an allegation, ignore it and then call their handler and expose it. That's the only way we're going to be able to finally get to the complete truth about that. Dr. Crenshaw is now a fighting man, and he's come back strong, and you'll be hearing more from him in the future. I was going to give you a lot more of an update on this, but I know y'all probably tired of hearing all this. Y'all been here for a while. Oh yeah, that's good. She reminded me to tell you about the document that was found, which the FBI immediately, and I suppose because Lyndon Johnson had already made a phone call, said, or made a statement, we've got to get involved after Oswald was shot by Ruger. Phone call was made, said get some people down there in the operating room, get some FBI agents down in the operating room, and get a deathbed confession from Oswald. In fact, I learned this, I may not have told you about this, but Dr. Jenkins, who was also one of the Parkland Hospital doctors, who attacked Dr. Crenshaw for his book and his story, had already said in 1988, and it's on Nigel Turner's film, The Men Who Killed Kennedy, he said there were several men, he called them Secret Service, he didn't know, in scrub suits, in the operating room with Oswald, and they had not given Oswald any anesthesia, and so he was not under that influence. And they were bending over, shouting in his ear, "Did you do it? Did you do it?" So, I don't know if it was Lyndon Johnson who made the phone call. I do know that there were men in that room who received a death confession, and the orders came from the White House. I might point this out, there were several calls that came to Dallas, not only to Parkland Hospital, but to Captain Will Fritz. One came from Cliff Carter, I know, who was Johnson's aide, and he even told him how to write up the indictment on Lee Harvey Oswald. Now you figure that one out. What's the White House doing getting involved in a Texas indictment? But I might point out to you, Cliff Carter, this aide to LBJ, is the one that picked up John Connally's clothes from Henry Gonzalez and they suddenly became laundry before they were turned over as evidence. I don't know what all was going on. I know that this man right here told the truth as best he could, and he was attacked personally and viciously for it. And the counterattack against him is now going to have a counterattack. So y'all be ready. Thank you. I won't hear what he has to say.
Our next speaker is one of my favorites, Larry Harris, co-author of a book, again before the House Select Committee came out with their findings, back when the Pew researchers had to be very brave and courageous. The title of the book, of course, was covered up by Gary Shaw and Larry Harris. I use Larry Harris every time I teach this course and every time I teach my criminal investigation course as a model of what a criminal investigator can do in the way of getting information if that investigator is determined and if the investigator really wants to. I'll tell you later on when we have more time about what Larry did in terms of getting up on the 6th floor of the school book depository when the court order saying no one would go up there other than authorized certain people and so forth. And about what he did in the ticket murder. He's generally recognized in the research community as being the foremost authority on the ticket murder. Larry Harris.
Welcome to Dallas. This is my hometown. And I was 11 years old when President Kennedy was assassinated. And I was 24 years old in 1975 when I decided to get actively involved in researching the Kennedy assassination. And now it's 1992 and I'm 40 years old. And, starting to feel it too after 17 years on this case. But if you told me back in 1975 that in 1992 at age 40 I would still be involved in working on the Kennedy assassination, and it would still be very much a topic of great interest and active interest in that subject at this late date, I just could not have foreseen that. But if we ever learn the truth about the Kennedy assassination, if we ever get to the bottom of this thing, it will have been in spite of and not because of the Justice Department and the FBI, because the failure of those agencies, the refusal of those agencies to honestly and aggressively investigate the Kennedy assassination and prosecute in the Kennedy assassination, those agencies have been criminally negligent in their handling of this case, and their inaction and lack of prosecution and thorough investigation have only served to perpetuate what I think is one of the most grotesque lies ever told to any nation by their government, and that is that Lee Harvey Oswald, acting alone, carried out the assassination of President Kennedy. In 1979, the Congress of the United States, after a 2-year investigation, issued a report concluding that President Kennedy had probably been killed as a result of the conspiracy. And they had a series of recommendations for the Justice Department and the FBI to continue the investigation after the congressional panel's tenure ran out. They had some real good suggestions for the Justice Department to follow up on areas of the case that warranted ongoing investigation. They named 3 men who they felt like had the motive, means, and opportunity to have had President Kennedy killed. Those men were James Hoffa, the Teamsters Union, Carlos Marcello, the mafia boss of New Orleans, whose turf extends on into Dallas, Santos Trafficante, the mafia boss out in Tampa, Florida. These were 3 men that were considered prime suspects in having arranged the assassination of President Kennedy. The congressional panel, had this good series of recommendations of work to be followed up on. But did the Justice Department and the FBI armed with the knowledge that Kennedy had been killed by a conspiracy? Did they go into action? Did they get the big guns out and go after the perpetrators of the crime? They didn't do anything. There was no meaningful action of any kind on the recommendations. And then in 1988, we found out, only through the Freedom of Information Act request, that the Justice Department and FBI had very quietly closed their books on the Kennedy assassination, saying that they could find no evidence of conspiracy. So that's the mindset that has allowed this case to linger, and the nagging doubts and the controversy and the speculation and the conjecture and so forth. All that has lingered because of the inactions of our government to adequately investigate and resolve this case when it had a chance. No, ultimately, if we do get to the bottom of this case, it will have been through the efforts of private citizens from all over the United States and even Canada and England and other countries, but mainly American citizens who cared enough about the concepts of truth and justice to get involved and try to hold the government accountable in this case. The textbook y'all are using in the course this year is Crossfire by Jim Marrs, which is one of the best books ever written on this case, one of the best overviews of what we have learned about this case over the last 29 years. And at the outset of that book, Jim Mars acknowledged what group had done the most meaningful work in terms of keeping the case alive and trying to reach some kind of resolution. Jim Mars wrote, "When a final truth concerning the assassination of President John F. Kennedy is accepted by the general population of the United States, it will have to be acknowledged that this truth came not from the government, the legal profession, or the news media. Rather, that truth will have come from the legion of individual citizens who have refused to accept superficial explanations. No one person will be credited with such a final truth because the names of the people who have fought to learn what really happened to President Kennedy, often at the risk of public ridicule and worse, have grown too numerous to enumerate. Every citizen who gave of his time, effort, and resources to study, assimilate, and disseminate assassination information will someday come to be regarded as part of an object lesson on how the individual citizen can indeed make an impact on a system that has proven either unable or unwilling to police itself. And on that day, all of the assassination researchers will receive the public acknowledgement they so richly deserve." Tony Summers, a great British investigative journalist, wrote a book called Conspiracy, which is one of the best books ever written on this case. It's the first book I refer to people wanting to read about the Kennedy assassination and learn more about it. And it's a very good overview from an investigative journalist. And Summers, too, also acknowledged the role of the private citizens in the Kennedy assassination. He wrote in his book, Conspiracy, "Those independent researchers of the Kennedy case who work on, in spite of passing years and press mockery, set themselves a thankless task. They are perennially assailed as sensation mongers or cranks, and in some cases that criticism has been justified. Others, however, with their scholarship and persistence, have filled a gap left by poor official investigation and shoddy journalism. Their best reward has been recent reinvestigation by congressional committees, a sign that a tiny handful of citizens can still budge a resistant establishment. The best of the private students of the case, those of whom the public hears little, have been vindicated by the formal finding in 1979 that President Kennedy's death was probably the result of conspiracy. They are not yet, however, satisfied. Reasonably enough, they now press for the location and prosecution of those who plotted the president's death. And indeed, that's what we're doing at this point. We recently had a symposium here in Dallas. There were over 400 people from all over the United States and Canada. And we met, with the idea of exchanging information, finding ways that we can be more unified and more persuasive and successful in waging our efforts to try to get all of the documents on the Kennedy assassination that are still withheld by the government released in their entirety, trying to seek out possibly the appointment of a special prosecutor to seek out prosecution in this case. The Justice Department can move when it wants to. They set out 40 years after the fact to investigate and prosecute Nazi war criminals, and were successful. They only fairly recently reopened investigations into and brought prosecution in some of the civil rights murders from the early and mid-1960s, and have been successful so far. You can't tell me that the power of the Justice Department, the FBI, the power of the federal government cannot get to the bottom of the John Kennedy assassination. If we can get those institutions to function as they're supposed to and be accountable to the people as they're supposed to. There's one other quote I'd like to read from Henry Hurt. He wrote a book called Reasonable Doubt. He also acknowledged the role of the private citizen in keeping this case alive. He talked about the shortcomings of the government and the news media and the legal profession to resolve this case. He says, despite these failures, it is encouraging that it was the very resiliency of the American system that prevented the JFK case from being stifled. A band of people, lawyers, homemakers, a goose farmer, businessmen, a mathematician, architect, scholars, secretaries, doctors, professors, a weekly newspaper editor, photographers, even former government agents would not swallow the official line. They began, each in his or her own way, their diverse work to get at the truth. Known as the critics, these people have managed through sheer diligence and persistence to keep the case alive and inch it towards some plausible resolution. They have been denounced from some of the most prestigious podiums in the land, called blood-sucking scavengers, accused of personal greed. It is they who have kept alive the search for truth. Without their work, the evidence uncovered and the legitimate leads developed would likely have been lost many years ago. Without their work, the continuing quest for truth about the JFK assassination would simply be impossible. So, the story of the private and independent research into the Kennedy assassination has been a remarkable and inspiring story because it's a real grassroots effort. People from all walks of life. Mary Ferrell, the legal secretary, that weekend, I mean that Friday and that Saturday that this happened, sending her boys down to the loading docks at the Dallas Times-Herald and the Dallas Morning News and bringing home every edition of every newspaper so that she could start comparing notes and seeing how the story was starting to change and evolve, and how it really started to change after Oswald was dead. You know, and so as far as I'm concerned, Mary Ferrell, was the first one. She started that Friday, which is the earliest that I know of. And Sunday, when Ruby killed Oswald there in the basement of police headquarters, a fellow named Penn Jones was a newspaper editor out here in Midlothian, Texas, about 25 miles south of Dallas, a little weekly newspaper in a small country town. And Penn was a World War II hero and a real feisty guy who wasn't afraid to call a spade, and he got involved that weekend. As soon as Ruby killed Oswald, he knew there was something wrong, and he got involved. This theater we're sitting in is called the Penn Jones Theater, and it's named after Penn Jones because he was one of the first and the most courageous to question and counter the government version of this assassination. And Penn Jones became a mentor to Gary Shaw back in the late 60s, got Gary actively involved in the case. In 1975, I was a college student. A guy named Robert Groden, a photo technician from up in New Jersey, took to nationwide television, went on a show hosted by Geraldo Rivera. It was March 6, 1975. It showed the Abraham Zapruder film of the Kennedy assassination on nationwide television for the first time. It was a ballsy thing to do. And it was the first real turning point in this case because millions of Americans tuned in on that Friday night to watch that show, and they were stunned by what they saw, to see the actual film of the assassination, and see the clear and obvious evidence of the shot from the right front, not from the Texas School Book Depository, that ended the president's life. And the excitement after that, people didn't talk about anything else for days after that. And college students, all kinds of college students all over the country got all fired up and excited about that. There was a group of them up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, formed a little organization called the Assassination Information Bureau. And started going around to college campuses all over the country, giving a slide presentation and lecture on it too. And they played standing room audiences college campuses all over. Robert Groden, after showing this film on nationwide television, took to the lecture circuit in colleges, and there was tremendous response and enthusiasm among young people, and started signing petitions and lobbying the Congress. The Assassination Information Bureau set up in Washington, D.C. and started lobbying with senators and congressmen. Bud Finster-Wall, the Washington attorney who helped draft the Federal Freedom of Information Act, which has been a godsend to researchers on this case, used his influence to meet with senators and congressmen and lobby for a new investigation. In 1975, things started happening. The Senate Intelligence Committee was doing an investigation. It was disclosed that the CIA in the early 1960s had entered into a partnership with organized crime with the objective of assassinating Fidel Castro over there in Cuba. All started to come out, and all these disclosures about CIA abuses and illegal activities and covert operations and assassination plots against foreign leaders. At the same time, all these college students going around showing these slides on the Kennedy assassination, film presentation, giving lectures, getting petitions signed. And Lord, it was an exciting period. And the outcome of that was Congress was so deluged with letters from the public and pressure from the news media and historians, even alumni of the Warren Commission, some of their staff people, that they had no choice but to reopen the investigation. And they undertook a 2-year investigation. When it was over and done with, they concluded that President Kennedy was probably killed as a result of conspiracy. They weren't able to identify the extent of the conspiracy or who the other participants were, but they set up a list of recommendations for the Justice Department to pursue those. And as I told you, they didn't do it. And Mary Ferrell here was instrumental in that panel's conclusion that there had been a conspiracy there in Dealey Plaza. She's the one that got the committee to study the Dallas police radio tapes and encouraged them to use the latest scientific advances and technology to study these tapes, because a Dallas policeman's radio microphone had been stuck open during the assassinations for a several-minute period. And it turned out that the shots there in Dealey Plaza had been recorded on this tape. You couldn't make them out because of the run of the motorcycle, but with the technology that had been developed, they were able to go in and study these. They did a big acoustical study in Dealey Plaza and put it all together and concluded that they picked up impulses that they identified as gunshots, and they determined that a fourth shot had been fired from the grassy knoll. And that came about because of the efforts of a private citizen. So it's really been a remarkable story how people, just private citizens from all professions, all walks of life, all ages, political persuasions, have gotten involved and kept this case alive. The other turning point in this case was the film JFK when that came out. And I'd like to just give you a little background on that to show you how people can make a difference. Penn Jones was my first mentor on the case. He got me involved just as he got Gary Shaw involved. He'd take me around with him to lectures, radio talk shows, and go interview witnesses. And I remember 1975 saying, well, it's been 12 years. It's been 12 years. What can we do at this late date? What can be done? That's how naive I was. And Penn assured me that there was enough work to be done to keep generations busy, working on this case. And he said, we're going to need young people to come behind us older folks and keep this case alive. And he took me under his wing and got me involved actively in the case. And he introduced me to a guy named Gary Shaw over in Cleveland, Texas. Gary was an architect, had his own business. He compiled quite a bit of research and had a good idea of doing a book, which he conceived as a primer on the Kennedy assassination, a guide for the layman that would lay out pictures, photographs, and documents, and really just be a book that any layman could pick up and go through and really start to understand what the problems and the controversy are in this case. Well, Gary Shaw didn't have time to do this with his own business, and I was a journalism student in college, so Penn Jones linked me up with Gary Shaw, and we collaborated on a book that was called Cover Up, which was published in 1976. And this was a little grassroots effort because Gary Shaw paid for that whole thing from start to finish out of his own pocket to have that book published. And it was limited to 3,000 copies and was sold by mail. And over a period of several years, largely through word of mouth, that book was sold out by mail. And Jim Mars, who wrote Crossfire, was a newspaper man over here in Fort Worth. And he got Cover Up, and boy, he fell in love with Cover Up. He would have thought this is a great book. This is telling it like it is, and it's easy to understand. This is a good book. And he had something with Gary Shaw and told him, you've done a great book here, and boy, somebody needs to take this and just build on it, and expand on it. That's what Jim Mars wanted to do, was just take that seed, that concept of Cover Up, and just expand on it and really lay it all out in one big comprehensive picture so everybody can see the big picture of the Kennedy assassinations, how awful the government's handling of this case was. And so Jim Mars ultimately wrote his own book, modeled after Cover Up, called Crossfire. Well, Oliver Stone, the filmmaker, read Crossfire and bought the rights to Crossfire to use as a basis for his book JFK, for the film JFK. And that film, as you know, has been the other big turning point in this case to really force it into public consciousness. And just the firestorm and publicity from this film, has been unlike anything I've observed in the 17 years I've worked on the case. It has really brought this thing into public consciousness, and it's a topic of great discussion and writing, and it has really helped keep this case alive. There's more books out here now than any one person can possibly afford to buy. And it seems like every book that was ever printed on the Kennedy assassination is back in print and revision. So we're at a point where the American people can learn more and are showing a stronger interest in the Kennedy assassination than perhaps at any other time before. So I just want to give you those little examples of how just individuals, private citizens from all walks of life can make a difference, both individually and as a group, this network of people across the country called the critics that are still working on the case. And I'd encourage all of you who have some conviction about this case, who feel compelled possibly to get involved in this case, I'd encourage you to do so, because it's something you can do for your country, and you can make a difference even at this late date. There's still a lot of work to be done. You know, how much do we really know about the Kennedy assassination? You've been hearing a lot about the legislation to get all these documents still in the government files released and made public. And it was estimated by the Washington Post and some other news organizations that there are still approximately 600,000 pages of classified documents still withheld by government agencies, documents which have not been seen by the public. There was a Freedom of Information lawsuit against the CIA back in the early 80s, and it was about 10,000 pages ordered by a judge to be released on the Kennedy assassination. And one of them was a CIA internal memorandum about the House Select Committee's congressional investigation. And lo and behold, the CIA internal memorandum says it acknowledged that the agency had 16 file drawers of classified documents on the Kennedy assassination, not seen by anyone outside the agency, not by the Warren Commission in 1964, not by the House Select Committee on Assassinations in the late 1970s. 16 file drawers of documents on the Kennedy assassination. What do we really know about this case? How much do we really know about this case? So in closing, I'm just going to say, if you care at all, if you feel compelled, if you feel a conviction to some way get involved in this case, do so. It's not too late to make a contribution. There's all kinds of work being done on all areas of the case by people all over this country and abroad. There's people over in England trying to research this case from across the ocean, and you have to admire people like that. So in closing, I just say that, irregardless of the passage of time, be it 29 years or 79 years, the assassination of an American head of state cannot remain shrouded in doubt, mystery, and controversy. And yet after 29 years, that remains the legacy of the Kennedy assassination. As long as a crime of this magnitude remains unresolved, our national integrity is not intact. Our historical integrity is not intact. And so I just say that, in closing, once for all, it's time to get to the bottom of John Kennedy's assassination. We're a better country than that. We should uphold the concepts of truth and justice on which our government and our nation were founded, and hold the government accountable. It's time once for all to get to the bottom of this case. Thank you all.
Mentioned Bob Grogan, the one who has done the most work with the Zapruder film. Today is Bob Grogan's 47th birthday. And Bob Cutler and Penn Jones and I feel so sorry for you poor 40 and 47-year-old men. He's still a young, just a senior citizen, Bob Cutler is. Penn is 78 and I'm 70, so we're really sympathetic with your he mentioned the police tape on September 17th of 1977, September 17th and 18th, I believe. The House Select Committee on Assassinations had a group of what they called critics. I do not consider myself a critic, I'm a researcher, but they called us critics. And they invited us to Washington for a meeting where the House Select Committee could ask us questions and get our answers on record. We three were there. And I was not bright enough to realize that this might change the course of history as it's been credited with doing. But I did suggest to the House Select Committee that they listen to those police tapes. I had an entirely different motive, but it worked anyway. They did follow me home and confiscate my tapes. I am in the process of putting those 40,000 3x5 index cards on computer. And I'm using an assembler language program which I had written for me, and it will not work on a Macintosh, but it will work on any IBM compatible machine. At this point, it's so pathetic, it's so small, the input, probably 3,000 to 5,000 entries. That's just minuscule compared to what I have, but I am planning to give that to researchers as I get farther along. I have let a few people in the United States, Gary Shaw has it, a researcher in Florida and one in California, are working with it to find any bugs in the program for me. And I'm very proud of that program. And you can search any field or all fields at one time. And you can, it's, of course, being in assembler language, it's very rapid, very, very fast. And I had to have variable fields because someone, a John Doe in volume 26, just plunk, he's here. What did he do? Well, we don't know. So I put his name in, volume 26, page 13, this name shows up. And I need no fields for that, just one little entry. But someone like George D. Morenshield took pages for the documentation. I have last name, first name, middle name, or alias. I have address, phone number, I have sources, and then a brief comment. Sometimes the brief comments run on and on. But I do intend to give those to researchers. I'm not selling them, but I do intend to give them to people. Now my last comment is about this review board that is presently, we hope, being chosen. We understand, I'm not wanting on it, but I have been told, Mary, you cannot get it. We will not take you on it. You are not a professional person. Well, that I certainly would accept that. But they will not accept someone like Gary Shaw, but he is a professional person. He is a professional architect with all of the license and the board certifications. They won't take him because he's so close to the case. They probably would use the same thing for Bob Cutler. We have to find professional people like this professor from Arkansas, like Victor Sims. You have not taken any active part in a formal investigation, but you would be unbiased in your looking at documents. We've got to find people for that board, review board, who are going to look at those documents, and just because it mentions George Bush's son or grandmother or somebody in it, well, that's national security. We can't release that one. We've got to have unbiased people, and we've got to get people writing letters. American Bar Association writing letters for lawyers who would be qualified and would be willing to devote the time. I understand it's going to be well paid. The positions will be, they will be well paid. But we're just going to have to be, I fear for what we're going to get on that review board, because we may end up with nothing released that will do us any good if we're not very, very careful. Do you agree with me? We've got to get, do you? We've got to get people who will be unbiased. And I don't want people who are going to just try to go in there, and if the document is defamatory to someone who actually had no part in anything, they just happened to live next door to somebody, certainly, don't release that. That would hurt them unnecessarily. But don't call everything national security just because it mentions FBI, CIA, DOD, or DEA, or something like that. Now, we cannot have that. We've got to get these documents released. I have about 20 rolls of microfilm that I purchased at a time in 67, 68, when they had not realized that there were all these people out there who were going to be reading these documents and trying to dissect them and index them and so forth. And they were releasing them what they now call in clear. There were no blacked out places on them. By the time the church committee came along and Senator Schweiker's subcommittee, I got at my desk one day at the law firm, I received a call from Troy Gustafson, who was Senator Schweiker's aide. And Troy said, Mrs. Ferrell, do you have CD certain number and a certain page? And I said, well, Mr. Gustafson, if it's been released, I have it. He said, oh, it was released back in 67 or 68, but it has been so deleted, they blacked it all out, and they can't find the original. I said, well, I've got it. And I went home and got that document. Can you imagine a housewife, legal secretary in Dallas, Texas, having to copy a document for the Senate because the archives had lost the original? I had one other occasion when Troy Gustafson called me and asked me if I had a document, and he said that document had been stolen from the National Archives, just disappeared. They didn't even have a blacked out copy. They learned that we could count spaces if they were FBI documents. If we hadn't used, the FBI never did use what they call an executive typewriter. The CIA went to executive typewriters. In fact, I'm sure they were invented from the CIA. But if they had a blacked out space, the FBI, you could count the spaces. And frequently, you could figure out the number of to whom that document referred. Now, they just white it all out, so you don't know how much space is in there. And they try to stay a step ahead of us. That's all. I'm sorry.
These three people are powerful examples of research, scholarship, investigation, and most importantly, persistence for all of us to follow. They are splendid examples and inspiration for many of us. Thank you very much for all your work. There are several people here closely associated with this effort called Assassination Information Center. I don't have time to introduce them all, but I believe this time as the director. There are two Larry H's here to make it confusing. Larry Harris has already been introduced. Larry Howard is the director of the Assassination Information Center. Larry.
Oliver Stone said that's $80,000 to ask us questions. As long as it's good for it. Like that. I'm introduced a man that's been doing this for 25 years or more. And wrote a book on Elias Oswald and also some articles. He had a newsletter. He did Umbrella Man. And he's going to show you the chart and some new aspects of the case. I'd like to introduce R.B. Cutler.
I think in view of the fact that you people are all involved something to do with the law, I would like to say that what has just happened is the prosecution has just rested its case. This is the defense. You will find that I will give you will not be happy, all everybody smiling and happy and understanding of everything, because there are other things, there are other ways of looking at things in which you are forced by the facts of the existence of things to understand things differently from perhaps the way they've been printed, the way they've been presented, and the way they're on television or radio. So just prepare yourself to be able to look at the other side of the coin. Now, when Mary Ferrell told you that Ken Jones has started a lot of people on this road, on the 30th of November, 1966, I met Ken Jones. He was in Boston, at a panel talking. And I went up and asked him exactly what Mary said. I said, Ken, what can I possibly do? He said, research the hell out of anything that you think is important. I was an architect at the time. As you can see from this drawing, you should be able to say, look, this guy knows how to draw somehow. I mean, what the hell? All this is just simple drafting. That's really all it is. But you do have to use your head in order to make the lines come out in the right place. So, what I want to do is to show you that since I started in 1970 because a friend of mine asked me to do a drawing of Dealey Plaza and show the crossfire that another friend of his had written in an article. It's Computer and Automation, May 1970. Fortunately, I had just been in Dealey Plaza in 1969 and in early 70 and had measured a lot of these various things so that I knew I had a perfectly good basic plan. That's the first thing you've got to start with. The first book that I wrote said, look, if you can fire a shot and it'll come out here and it'll hit the governor, hit the president, and then go through the governor, then the Warren Commission is correct. It's impossible. I made five different locations of the limousine along Elm Street, and not one of them made the bullet go in here, out here, in here, out here, down, round, back, and then in the back. Not one. So that was a good beginning. So they knew I had something going for them. So again, I started off, I have been researching what's called matching shots with wounds. And you've got some scars. For instance, there's a scar over here, two scars over here, one on the pavement and one on the curb. That's what I call scars. You've got scars on the limousine. So if you add up all those shots and scars, and you look at the Zapruder film, and you find the reaction so that you can then determine when the hit frame is. In other words, when did a bullet hit the president? When did the bullet hit the governor? Those are the things that are important as far as I personally am concerned. They are listed right here. And as far as I'm concerned, they are correct. There are 4 hits, as you can see in red, 1, 2, 3, 4, and there are 4 misses. The misses are in black. The misses, of course, will have to be not quite as precise. It's impossible to be precise about when a miss was fired, because nobody knows anything about it, in effect. Now, the other way of looking at this is to reconstruct it from the standpoint of the people who originated it. In other words, if you become a designer of the assassination, of the ambush, you're now working for the conspiracy. And you're thinking to yourself, how do we get this done best? What has come out of this study is that there are 5 different squads of 2 men each. There's a squad here, a squad here, a squad here, a squad there with 2 men here, and a squad here with 2 men behind the picket fence. The stockade fence is not a picket fence. I come from New England, I know the difference. The picket fence is quite different from the stockade fence. Okay. This has, I've only gotten into this within the last couple of weeks, as a matter of fact. This drawing has just been made. And there are some things in here that will hopefully raise your hackness a little bit. And you will want to find out whether I'm right or wrong. Anybody that wants to find out that I'm wrong, I am very happy to talk to them. Very happy indeed, because I think I'm right. I have to be able to think I'm right in order to put things down on paper. You've got to make up your own mind that this is correct. So I'm saying, right now, this is what happened in Dealey Plaza 29 years ago. And anybody that wants to come and tell me it's different, that's fine. But they've got to walk in my moccasins, as they say, and work and talk the way I talk, and investigate the way I have investigated. That's all I ask. Anybody can say anything else they want to. I don't care, but they can't refute this without talking to me in the way that I have done whatever it is that I've done. I think it's easiest just to explain the shots. Crossfire 92, which you can still buy outside, only has 8 shots. This has 9 shots now. Ted Jones had 9 shots back about, he still has, and he influenced me into having 9 shots. I've been through Crossfire since 1970, 70, 71, 2, 3, right? 6, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 80, 81, 82. I've done a lot of Crossfire drawings. This is 93. We're out ahead by a whole month and a half, as you can appreciate, which is fine. All right, so we have 9 shots. The first shot is right up here. This squad is called, I call them the planter. Penn said one day, he said, you know, somebody must have told those guys to go up and fire a couple of shots out of that window so that they'd have the cartridges, the holes. So they, you know, you fire, well, after you got a hole coming out, snapping out, okay. So they had to have 3 holes because they found 3 holes, as you may know. They found 3 holes, and then they found the rifle. The rifle was found about in that position here. You haven't got enough room in the whole TSPD. And then, of course, they trapped Oswald in the Texas Theater, brought him in, and they've got 1 man, 3 holes, 1 rifle. Case is closed. Case is closed. You know that kind of thing if you're involved in any kind of legal thinking. When you close the case, it should be closed. It wasn't, of course, as you know. We've been still at it. So the first shot here, and these shots here, these from here were intentional misses. Here's where the limousine is at 150, right there. This shot is wide of the limousine, and it's way over the top of it. It happens to hit down in here, and there's a fellow called Tay who got a little wound on his cheek. Didn't even realize it. So somebody says, hey, you've got blood on your cheek, young man. You better look at it. So then they found the scar, of course, on the Main Street curb. The second shot comes from the Dow Tex building. And because the man was the only way I can figure it, and again, am I in speculation or am I trying to use common sense? I hope you will agree that it's common sense. He was nervous. He missed. There is a scar on Elm Street, somewhere right along in through here. I put it down in here. Maybe it should be back a little further, who knows? But there is a scar on Elm Street. It's never been found, but it's in the Warren Commission hearings. The testimony of Mrs. Baker says she saw one. And somebody else. I can't remember exactly who it was. There is a scar on Elm Street. We must account for that scar on Elm Street. That's the first shot out of this squad here. Santana. The third shot is the Umbrella Man, right here. It happens, and the hit frame is Z188. My friends Sprague and Sharrett found, they decided that Z189 was the hit frame. It's a very difficult thing. The president is just waiting at this point, and it's a very small reaction. His hand, you might say all that happens is it sort of vibrates or it moves a little bit unnecessarily, because then the hand starts to come down and up again, and of course when he finally gets the 4th shot, which is the back shot, he goes into this kind of thing and he's bringing his hands up like this, and he's also bending forward. But the Umbrella Man, of course, firing a poison flechette, which is a mini rocket, a self-propelled mini rocket, electrically propelled. The umbrella had a a trigger down here you can press, which would then, it would then activate the flechette which went out through the umbrella and went into the president's throat, just above the collar line and just under the Adam's apple. That a lot of people cannot possibly understand. And I must say that when we first found out, in 1975, we found out that the umbrella was a weapon because you cannot wound the president in the throat unless you are on the limousine side of the Stemmons sign. And the Stemmons sign, as you know, has been taken away. So how could we reconstruct it? But you have to reconstruct it. That's what you're supposed to do with your imagination. You've got to. You're going to do this. Because from here, you couldn't get by the Stemmons sign if you wanted a bullet in the president's throat at that point. If you're firing from behind the fence, very many people still say that that's where the throat wound occurred, with the origin of the shot. It did not. It couldn't, because you cannot get through the sign and have the bullet enter at 188. Therefore, you have to find somebody. And if you look at Willis 5, if any of you know Willis 5, you will find the umbrella man with the umbrellas over his head, and all the people along there on the right-hand side of Willis 5, they're all applauding, or they're waving, or they're not trying to point and kill or anything like this. So therefore, by a simple process of elimination, the man who hit the president in the throat at 188 must be on the limousine side of the Stemmons side. That's why we have the umbrella man right here. You couldn't help but say the umbrella therefore must be a weapon. You then figured yourself, well, okay, I had a bullet. No, I had a little pellet with a CO2 handle and all, the tricky zing you shoot. You shoot a small pellet and it goes into the president's throat. We sent the umbrella man down to Fletcher Crowley, who's book, by the way, JFK. You may know that book now. Fletcher immediately sent a letter back saying, hey, instead of that pellet, try this little flechette. He has since said that only about 50 people knew about that flechette in 1963. Therefore, of course, the most important thing to do was to get that flechette out of the president's body. Had it been found at autopsy, all hell would have broken loose. Plus the fact, of course, this was a frontal shot, and it made it quite difficult for Oswald to fire 3 shots here and yet wound the president in the front. Therefore, this, again, you get David Lifton's book, Best Evidence, and he turns up the idea of pre-autopsy surgery. It's most important that you recognize that, because that was one of the great things that has happened in the research that's gone into making up a firing sequence such as this. All right, the 5th shot. What's the 5th shot? The 5th shot is the chest shot. From here, from this building window number 14. We got into the TSBD. Larry Harris was one of us, as a matter of fact. I got permission to go into the TSBD in 1977, November 1977. Went up to the roof, then came down to the 6th floor. I looked out that window and I said, exactly. What happened was the governor was hit by a bullet that ricocheted off some part of that tree, some twig, something. There is no reason under the sun for a guy that's being paid $10,000 or $15,000 to go up and kill the president, for him to shoot and wound the governor. None. That's a miss. An unintentional, he made a mistake. What happened is, again, use your head. If you are aiming out the window at the motorcade moving this way, and you're a little nervous, you fire early. You're aiming at the president, you fire early, the damn thing zips off a little bit to its left, goes right through the governor here, governor there, this, and it probably was lost through the floorboards, or it may have been picked up by somebody else before the limousine. No, the limousine went to the garage that night up in Washington. Who knows who was in there picking up evidence? I mean, evidence was the thing that they were after. And don't think that they didn't pick it up. I'm quite certain. I have no knowledge of that. But if you use your head and think how you would do, what would you do if you were controlling the conspiracy and your starting would cover up right away? It's important to consider that. to think that way. Think the way those people thought. What would you do? Don't think about trying to solve the case from your point of view. Think about how it was done, what the operators had to do to absolutely pick up all the stuff they possibly could and make it look, oh, lovely. All right, so that's the sixth shot. The seventh shot is, I don't know, some of you must know the Ricky White story. Roscoe White said he fired 2 shots from behind the stockade fence, and one of them hit the president in the throat. I just told you that's impossible. The other one hit the president in the head. I will tell you in a moment that that is also impossible. So Roscoe White fired 2 shots. Now, I believe that. But why did he fire 2 shots? He fired 2 shots so that these people who are up on the 6th floor and the 3rd floor could have the time to get downstairs and go that way, while everybody else ran over this way to find out what was happening, because here's where the noise was, here's the action. A lot of people saw the puff of smoke, they heard the shots, and they may have even seen Roscoe firing, for all I know. But everybody in Keeler Plaza ran this way, as you know. They ran over the grass knoll, up into the railroad yards, and there was the Secret Service saying, hey, it's all right, Secret Service. You know that story, I'm sure, and this is all part of making up this solution to the Kennedy assassination. It's part of it. It works. You may also know that Ed Hoffman, who was standing way over here on Stemmons, was able to look behind the stockade fence. He saw a man run this way to about this point here and throw the rifle to another guy, throw it over the steam line and over the switch. There was a switch box there. Throw it to another guy who disassembled it, put it in a bag, and then zapped off this way. Ed Hoffman's testimony is there. I mean, he's been in and out of here all the time. Wonderful person. He's a deaf mute. And of course, nobody would believe him. And he had a hell of a hard time trying to get it across to somebody. But he has finally done it. He's been in and out. I've met him. We know him. And they proved it by taking the pictures at the right time. He can see behind the fence. And that is one of the things that happened. This whole thing behind the fence was a pattern of diversion. In other words, if you get somebody running this way and get somebody running this way, people coming up this way might see them. That's exactly what they wanted to do. That's how conspiracy was worked out. So that all these people's attention would be up in here somewhere. And these guys would have a chance. They can get out of the elevator at the 5th floor. They couldn't get out of the 6th floor. I think they had to come down the stairs, zap over to the passenger elevator, go down into the basement, and then wait until it was time for and the building was secured by the people who were in charge. That's another thing that you figure out if you're working for the conspiracy cover-up immediately. Get this building secure so that we can get these guys down, and then we'll zap them off when the cars come by at the right time. This is very easy. You go to the middle of the building, go down the elevator, and go right to the basement. Walk that way up to here, and come right out on the ramp. Go by on Houston Street, you can see those ramps. There are 2 ramps actually, but at one time, I don't know whether there's only one at that time, but it's very easy to go to the basement, come up the ramp, walk up the ramp, get into your car, and you'll be going, while everybody else is messing around over in here. This is the way you should look at what has happened in Dealey Plaza. The 8th shot is the controversial shot. As you've heard, Dr. Crenshaw has stated that, of course, the shot came from the front. If you've seen the Zapruder film and you've seen the head go backwards, you immediately react. I did it. I was a sandwich in between in a lecture. I had the Zapruder film, the guy would lecture, I'd show the film, and then we'd have a full lecture and question and answer. So I know for a year and a half, I was absolutely convinced that there's no question. If you see the president's head go back, it's got to be somebody to the front. However, if you start to think, how can we possibly have 2 shots coordinated within less than an 18th of a second apart from 2 different directions? And how can you have a shot come into the president's head, which comes into a hole in his head and does not go out this side, but turns around and goes out this way? It doesn't make any sense. You just have to believe yourself. It's very hard to go against all the printed word, the media, the magazine articles, the books, and your friends. They all say the same thing. There must be a shot from the front. It cannot be a shot from the front. You can go down and stand behind the fence right now and look out, and this, by the way, is at the 6th set of white lines. The 7th set of white lines is right at the bottom of the steps. So you can easily point from here to there. And this tree is exactly in the way. You cannot possibly track the president as he's coming down here and hit him at the time that he has to be hit, which is, see, 3, 1, 2.5, in between 12 and 13. That's the one good thing that the House Select Committee on Assassinations did. The only thing that I know that's of any value in that whole operation, as far as I was concerned. The whole thing was engineered by the CIA. By the way, I can tell you a small story about that too, because I happen to be involved with Dick Sprague and Chris Sharrett in briefing the House Select Committee staff in 1976. In the last week of 1976, we spent 5 hours giving them a slideshow and telling the staff, boys, you've got to get started getting interested in conspiracy. By the time these 3 people got to the committee and the staff had been changed, and they were all just making a sort of a nice thing, asking the critics in for their opinion. What happened was, that's where Dick Sprague found out, began to really find out, that there was a conspiracy, and he started going after it. And they got rid of it right away. As you know, the House Select Committee, they got rid of him, they got rid of Henry Gonzalez, they got in Stokes became chairman, and G. Robert Blakey became consul. So we do know that some of this thing is correct. So the headshot again, there's one more thing that I'd like to tell you about the headshot, because I think it's important that you understand that everything you see is not perhaps exactly the way you think it is. If you go at the other side of the coin and look at the headshot, you will find that the head goes forward. In 1976, ITEC Corporation, published a report for CBS on the Zapruder film. They made a very intensive study. It so happens ITEC is about 25 miles from where I am. So when this came out, I got right in the car, went right over and met the guys that did the work. And I found out, they had found, for instance, there is no evidence of any other shot coming to the president's head after 313. And they were looking right at the film. And when you look at I made some drawings of the film at 314, all the top of the head is gone, right through here like this. This part is perfectly all right. This part is part that's gone. In other words, it's a shot through the top of the head. If some of you play tennis, you know you can make a topspin on a tennis ball, and it will tend to reverse. If some of you play golf, you may have missed, and you hit the top of the ball, and the ball go out and come right back to you. That's exactly what happened. The head went forward, and ITEC spelled it out in words of one syllable. They said it went forward 2.3 inches in half a Z frame. That's a very short space of time. That's a 36th of a second. It then took 3 Z frames, 1/6 of a second, to come back that same 2.3 inches. So therefore, what you have is a double motion. If you have ever read the Josiah Thompson's 6 Seconds in Dallas, you will find that he and Salandria had they took 2 projectors, and right now the National Archives took 2 projectors on one screen. They found that double motion. They found the forward motion. This is 1966, I think, or 65, because his book was published in 66. They found that double motion. They saw the head go forward, and they saw the head go backwards. They said to themselves, gee, like going backwards, that must be a double shot to the head. They assumed that right away. Ever since 1966, everybody has been having 2 shots to the head. It's a mistake. In 1972, I decided it was a mistake. I've been eminently unsuccessful in convincing anybody that I'm correct. However, This drawing shows what I believe. If somebody can show me how another shot can possibly come from anywhere in Dealey Plaza to make the head go backward, and it goes backwards very carefully, almost right along that path. It's extraordinary. I plotted it on the, have the limousine. Here's the president. You've got, and where does he go? Where does this come? He goes right back along, almost right down the center line. So the head is going backwards along the flight path, along the track of the shot that comes into the top of his head. I don't know that I can say much more. That's Crossfire 93. There's 9 shots. The 2 shots here, and all these guys are, this is the way I have it worked out, that they did the job. They thought it all out very carefully. They liked the idea of bringing this around here, slowing the limousine down so these guys could, and the poison is one thing that Dick Sprague, my friend Sprague, decided. When we finally got around to the umbrella man thing, then the poison flechette came out in the Senate committee hearings in 1975, I think it was. And they talked about this flechette, poison dart, and they showed how they mounted him on a pistol, and they had him in, and somebody said, and in an umbrella, and immediately Senator Baker said, oh yes, how about that pencil? They stopped the umbrella, they stopped talking about the umbrella just like that, just as soon as they possibly could. They never let us in on the umbrella. However, that was a year after we had decided that the umbrella was a weapon. So of course, we thought we were, we patted ourselves on the chest. We were pretty smart. That's the way it was. This is the way it is as I see it. If somebody else wants to come in and tell me that it's differently, I'll be happy to listen to them. But that's really all I wanted to show you guys is there's always something else to remember and think of and look at and be sure that you trust yourself. Trust yourself to make up your own mind. Don't read, don't listen to anybody else. Do it